Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is part 2 of my June wrap up. So if you want to know what the rules and stipulations of this kind of wrap up is going to be, I recommend you jump on to volume 1. If you have watched that, I'm just going to jump straight in because I'm going to assume you have otherwise. That was slightly more jarring than the first time I did it. The first time I did it, it sounded great. Pot is open. Timer is set. Let's see if I can do better than 7, which was what I did in volume 1. So the first one I'm going to wrap up is In the Ravenous Dark by Aim Strickland. Holy shit, this book was so good. It was so good. Now, I've had a really bad run of pre-ordering books that I didn't like, and I pre-ordered this one pretty much the moment I started the NetGalley arc. I really loved the writing style. I liked that it was, although it was high fantasy, it was very feminist, it was very exciting, it was very action-packed, the pacing was great. I like that it takes a mythology of a creature that we fully understand and manipulated it into this other thing. It felt very otherworldly, and now I want to compare it to From Blood and Ash. Both of those books look at very sexual people dealing with very classical monsters like vampires and werewolves, and the writing style for me is just, this is so far ahead of what From Blood and Ash wanted to be, and I feel like this is the book From Blood and Ash wanted to be, because it has, whilst it's not necessarily as raunchy, the sex has more meaning behind it, the writing style is just better, the banter is better, the main character knows they're an awful person and isn't trying to be anything they're not other than to survive, and I just thought the whole thing was so great and I was just so pleased. I just loved it, and I don't want to give too much away because I feel like actually what I've said already is probably too much, but just to give you a brief rundown of the synopsis. The main character of this is Rovin. She's a pansexual blood mage, basically, and blood mages are meant to be tied to these like ghostly companions that control them, but because she's managed to evade the King's Men thus far, she hasn't been used in the same way as them. But it's a really, really dark fantasy, grim dark fantasy, but like expert writing. Trigger warnings though for like threat of sexual assault and implied rape, lots of violence and lots of gore, death, etc. She literally sees her dad brutalized in the first chapter or so. This was very much similar to my response to Ruined Song, where the first chapter just has some really fucked up shit in it, and then I knew it was going to be the one for me. So I absolutely adored this and would definitely recommend it to everybody. It's great. So that's the first one. I don't really have much more to add because I don't want to spoil it for you, but it's so good. Next one is going to be it's going to be The Mime Order by Samantha Shannon. Now, I read the Bone season in January, might have been Feb. Regardless, really enjoyed it. I liked the premise of the world, I liked the monsters, I thought the whole thing was really, really clever. But the problem is they set up these monsters that control the world, or at least control England, and to go into book 2, where it looks at very small town politics for the entirety of the book, I just didn't care. I didn't care about the characters. I didn't care about her relationship with Jackson. I didn't, like, as in, like, they're not like it's not a sexual relationship, but just the push and pull of them. I didn't care about the intrigue there. I didn't care about the plot twists there. I just wanted to know what was going to happen with these creepy monsters that are literally sucking the life out of people. And it really suffered from book 2 inosis. So yeah, I understand that it had to build up the world, and like a sequel in a book always has to like build on from the premise of the first book. But they're meant to have learnt the lesson, and then the world expands where their lesson then adapts and they have to change again. I get that. I just didn't see that in this book. I felt like she came out of the world a changed person, but she doesn't change in this book other than that she gets slightly more powerful. Cool. But like that could have just happened in the next book. I didn't need this book. So I'm hoping I prefer The Song Rising. What worries me is it's been a split room of people saying, oh don't worry, The Mime Order is the worst book of the series, and other people saying, oh don't worry, The Song Rising is the worst book in the series. That worries me, as something that I'm about to go into. Everyone agrees The Mask Falling is worth getting through those books for. However, so yeah, it was just not a great sequel for me. I feel like this should have been book 1, the setup for it, and then book 2 you have the big monsters, or at least the set, like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's really, really hard going from like a big, expansive, mythical world to just local politics. It just didn't jam for me, so I was really disappointed with that one, and I only gave it 3 stars. These Violent Delights, however, is another one that I pre-ordered and absolutely adored. It did take me forever to get to it, but I have pre-ordered These Violent Ends because I was so intrigued by this one. This is a Romeo and Juliet retelling, but it pits them in 1920s Shanghai. They are both the heirs of rival gangs. Juliet is from a Chinese gang that does gun running and drugs and things like that, and then you also have Roma, who is from a Russian gang family who have kind of like have moved to Shanghai and are kind of like slowly but surely taking over with the Communist Party, but also drug running and kind of manipulating, and they're both awful people. But what I really, really love is then there's this additional fantasy element, whereas there's this monster that is lurking in the Shanghai River that is then poisoning people and forcing them to go mad, so they are forced to then work together. What I really liked about this is it does kind of play with the original mythos of Romeo and Juliet, in that it feels like it's prior to the play. Like, there are literally moments where it feels like it is drawn straight from the play, but it also feels like a prequel to the play, because yes, they have fallen in love and stuff like that, but Roma has portrayed Juliet by this point, so she's kind of having to battle those demons of whether she can trust him again or not. He knows more about the thing than she does, so it ends up being this like moment where she has this revelation and it's really powerful. But again, much like with the Ravenous Dark, the pacing is great, the writing is really easily comprehensible. You're not going into this being like, oh my god, just get on with it. Like, it just moves so quickly and the characters are so well developed that it's just a really fun, really easy read, and I am obsessed. It was one of those books where I went into this being like, I can't wait for another Shakespeare retelling, and actually the fact that it was a Shakespeare retelling was just a bonus, a cherry on top of what is fundamentally a fantastic book / cake. To just finish off that metaphor where I started it. Absolutely loved it, and again would recommend it to everybody. It's great. It does make it a lot easier to move through books when I actually like them, I think, because I spend less time slagging them off. Another one, The Worst Best Man. Now, this was another one. This has been on my TBR like 100 times. It was my TBR vet. It was the book that I had the longest, because when I started BookTube a year ago, it was the first book gifted to me, and I was looking for more romance and I was looking for more authors of colour, and when it actually came around to reading it, I wasn't in the mood for romance anymore, and it just kind of sat on my shelf for ages, and that is a crying shame, because this book is hilarious. It is genuinely so funny. The raunchy moments are great, the characters are fantastic, and basically the premise of this is, in the opening chapter you have this main character whose name I've forgotten, Lena. She's a wedding planner, and on the day of her wedding, her partner sends a text to his brother saying, you're completely right, I heard what you said last night and I've decided I can't go ahead with the wedding. And he leaves it to the brother to tell her the wedding's not going ahead. Now, she is part of a Brazilian family that are a lot, but don't appreciate the stereotype of being a lot and having a lot of emotions and things like that. So she spends a lot of her time forcing herself into this stoic personality that doesn't really suit her. But as she spends time with the brother, because they're forced to work together, much like with Romeo and Juliet, like they're forced into this situation they can't really escape, they start to develop feelings together. So it's not an enemies to lovers, it's like it kind of is, in that she hates him to begin with, but actually they have like a lot in common, and there's just shenanigans left, right and centre. They're forced into situations they don't want to be in, they're forced to be honest with each other. There is a share the bed trope in this as well. So there's just so much in here that I feel like romance readers will absolutely adore, and yet I've not heard anyone talk about it. I don't know anyone else who's read this book, but if you love Talia Hibbert, give Mia Souza a go, because it's so good. It's so good. And I think as someone who used to work in the wedding industry, when you see those elements of her talking about the wedding, that was quite nostalgic to me, but it didn't feel overdone. it was just like, because it was great. It was great. A romance that I can get behind. Loved it. Loved it. Will not be unhauling this. I'm keeping this so that in 5 years time I can read it and just enjoy it all over again. It was great. I've got All Eyes on Me by Bo Burnham stuck in my head. So all I hear is, get your fucking hands up. Cinderella is dead. This was really disappointing. And it's really hard because at the moment I'm reading This Poison Heart via NetGalley, which I think is better, but I went into this really excited for it. And the first half of it was fine. It set up a really misogynistic world where Cinderella is used as propaganda, and it was kind of a mix between like high fantasy and YA fantasy in the way the world is developed. They seem to have some modern technology, but not a lot, so I found it difficult to place. And then the book just kept going, and there was just stuff in it that just didn't need to be there, and characters I didn't care about, and plot twists that didn't need to happen, and it lost something around the midway point, and I just couldn't get over the constant misogyny in this. And I get that that's the point, is that it's an LGBTQ character who is a character of colour who is combating white patriarchy. There's so much in this that I think is worth spending time on, and yet I don't know, I got about halfway through and I just thought, oh, it's just like every other retelling. Like, some halfway through, and I cannot for the life of you tell you what it was. It just lost momentum for me and I just didn't enjoy it. So I'm unhauling this copy. I have got high hopes for This Poison Heart because in general I am enjoying that one more than I enjoyed Cinderella is Dead, but it's not starting on a good foot because I didn't enjoy this. I think I gave it 3 stars in the end, but it was towards the 3 to 2 stars. I just don't need to read books about a misogynistic patriarchy anymore. I live in one of those. So, yeah. Anyway. Okay, next is Lustre by Raven Lalani. Now this one was weird because I went into this thinking that it was going to be like Queenie, where it delved into something socio-political but generally would have like an upbeat or humorous tone to it. The whole back page of like authors endorsing it was like, it's so witty, it's so funny, it's so clever, and whilst it is clever, it is not a comedy. It's not funny to me at all, and I don't know if I'm just being a fucking stuck-up prude or just like not in on the jokes or whatever, but I just did not find it funny. The story is about a young woman who's having an affair with an older man who really is only interested in her because she is a black woman, and she's only really interested in him because he is unattainable to her. They met online, like chatting. She finds out that he has a black adopted daughter, and she kind of becomes a surrogate in their family, and his wife like best friends her and like keeps her around right up until she has sex with her husband again, and then they like split up. But this girl's life is just fucking bleak. Like, everything that happens to her is just awful. There's, you know, sexual violence, predatory behaviour, there's like grooming, there's just so much. There's police brutality in it. She gets like arrested at one point for like no reason whatsoever. Like, the whole thing is just fucking traumatic. And there is like, if I'd gone in knowing that it was going to be more like Such a Fun Age and less like Queenie, fine. But because I went in expecting it to be funny, and like there were little moments where like I was reading a bit to someone and they laughed, and I just didn't get the joke. I just didn't see what was funny about that at all. I really, really struggled with it. But if I'd gone in knowing it's going to be a hard-hitting book, I probably would have loved it. Like, I still rated it really highly. It's beautifully written. It's a really interesting, carefully crafted story. Raven Lalani has obviously worked her arse off on this. Like, it's stunning, but it is so not what I expected. And I feel like I just need to tell everyone that if what you want is something literary and calculated and cold, fine. That's what that is. It is not The Worst Best Man. Like, it's not going to be a fun little romp. It's going to be horrible, but in the best possible way. Like, I enjoyed reading. Like, I enjoyed it for what it was, but it took so much time for me to get into that mindset. Because if you go into a book thinking it's going to be one genre and then it's something completely different, that for me is really jarring, and why I like to go into books as blind as possible, because then that isn't the case. But when the entire back page is selling you this comedy and it's not funny, like, these things are still happening to people, her life is fucking bleak, no one is helping her, she's got this one white woman who seems to think that she can save her in some way, and then when she fails to save her, kicks her out again. Like, the whole thing is just bleak. It's just really fucking bleak. And if what you want is bleak, fine, it's great. That's not what I wanted from this book. And it was just, I just have such a kind of like cognitive dissonance about it, because I can appreciate that it was beautifully written and I enjoy it for those elements. As a writer, I would recommend reading it, having it on a university syllabus. I would absolutely recommend it. It's great. As a book for you to enjoy on your holiday, or as a Sunday read, which is what I did it for, no. So I'll stop now, but it was a lot. Emotionally, it was a lot. Okay, we've got two. We'll try and get two done. So the first one is Death Note. I needed a short read, and I found out that my brother had these mangas, so I thought I would give it a go. I remember trying to watch the anime of this and just not getting into it, and I have not watched the film, because I've been told not to bother with the film. But I actually really enjoyed this. I like the fact that the main character is awful. I like that it has those gothic-y vibes in the style of like the art. I like the fact that there's plot twist after plot twist, and that this main character is actually incredibly intelligent and really manipulative. It's very much a Sherlock versus Moriarty, but with supernatural elements to it, so really enjoyed that. Was pleasantly surprised by that, so I'm hoping my brother also has volume 2, because I only got a chance to read volume 1, but I was pleasantly surprised by that, yeah. And then the other one that I've pulled out by accident is Mercy, which I did not enjoy. This is a graphic novel about an alien monster that is discovered in the centre of the earth by accident somehow, I think, who then comes back and just starts eating people. But it's a hot mess. The storyline is all over the place. I'm so disappointed, because I was so excited by the front cover, and actually when I got about halfway through reading, I realised that it was Mirka Andolfo's, and I've read Andolfo's before and really not liked them. So if I'd known that going in, which is stupid because I should have just looked, but really I got caught up in the pretty face, I got caught up in the fact that it's an Image graphic novel, and usually Image are just the one for me. Oh, it was just awful. The pacing was all over the place. The plot didn't make any fucking sense. Characters were suddenly monsters and then they weren't again. And there's this one little character who's like this really cute little brunette girl who's like adopted by the monster, basically, who sees her mum in the alien, and therefore thinks that this woman can do no wrong, even though she's literally seen her like kill people. She's just like, oh well, I guess they were bad guys. Like, it just doesn't make any fucking sense. And the fact that it is literally volume 1, but it feels like it's like volume 3. There was just so much in there. I was just like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know where I am. It just wasn't good. It wasn't good. And I was really disappointed, because I'm getting really into graphic novels, but this was just not it. And it's so pretty, it had so much potential, and it was not good. 10 seconds. Okay, let's try and... Last one. I'll see if I can do it in a word or in 5 seconds. A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. They just want to have sex, and then they don't for some reason. And then they do. It's my 20 minutes. So yeah, A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. It was interesting. It kind of reminded me of the last book in Twilight, or like the second to last book in Twilight, where Bella is just like, I just want to have sex with you, and Edward's like, not till we're married, and it's just like, just have sex. Just have sex. That's fine. As long as it's consenting and you're both happy to do that, which you clearly are, just have sex. They don't need to get married. And then there was like some fantasy stuff at the end, but it was literally like the last chapter. That felt like a filler book as well, to be honest. But it wasn't nearly as wild, like a roller coaster. The first one had been such a roller coaster, and the second one was just more of like a merry-go-round. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, let's see how many I did that time. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8. There we go. I have beat my personal best. My personal best is now 8. 9! I can count. I keep finding bits of paper, that's how. So yes, we got 9 done in total, which I think is not half bad. And now I have set myself a new target of beating 9 in a single wrap-up. So majority of these will be available via Waypoint. Please feel free to go over to my website, buy yourself a book. You'll be supporting me and my content, and a little treat for yourself. Let me know which of these books you're most interested in now that I've told you how amazing they are, and other than that, have a nice day.